I didn't even know that this was here.
No?
This whole upstairs. This is quite calm.
Yeah. Well, over here we've got a relaxing, quiet corner, a little library going on up here.
I'd have spent more time sitting up here. It's just
they're just reading comic books over there for anyone that needs a little bit of an escape from the, like you say, the bedlam downstairs.
Yeah, just yesterday was chaos, man.
Was it?
Absolutely chaos. So yeah, cool.
So thank you for joining me. We're on the BTS Creative Academy podcast here at Thought Bubble. This episode of the podcast has been sponsored by Supernova Media, who support creatives in their endeavours, and they've brought me here today. So I very much appreciate Supernova Media for doing so. So welcome, Cian.
Yes, Cian. Yeah, it's an Irish name.
Irish name.
It's a curse abroad. But yeah. That hard C confuses people. I get a lot of people in the States who are like, is it Sean? Is it Cian? But no, it's Cian.
Well, I also had one of your friends and collaborators on earlier today, and he had a name that was quite difficult as well.
Yeah, I know. For like
Ruri.
Yeah.
And
we've complicated everything for us. Yeah, it's an island of very complicated people.
Now, there was a great... He told me there was a great story behind his name as the Ginger King.
Really?
Telling me. Yeah, has he not told you?
He's not told me that. No, because he knows I'd absolutely destroy him over that. The Ginger King.
The Ginger... So when you go downstairs...
Oh, yeah, I got to go. All right, there's the Ginger. All right, Ginger King.
All right, Ginger King. Yeah.
Wow.
Well, he went into it a bit, and it's the Red King.
You think you know someone?
No,
that is ridiculous. He's like my best friend. And I've never heard that.
Never heard of him. Okay. So now...
God.
You will refer to him as the Ginger King.
Okay, amazing. Brilliant.
Which is brilliant.
Yeah.
So tell me a little bit about what brings you here to Thought Bubble.
So I am a DC exclusive comic artist. So I'm downstairs tabling because I have a new book coming out. It's out next week, called A Question. But one of the main reasons is to come and just see all of the guys that are here. I'm based in Spain, so I don't get to see an awful lot of the creators from the UK. So this is kind of my chance to come and table with some...
Be part of a community.
I was saying to the guys, because it takes me quite a while to get here from where I live in Spain, I was saying to some of the guys that there's a real kind of school trip energy off this, like, because I know that, there's some troublemakers downstairs. So yes, this is just... I'm used to doing shows around different European cities, but to come to one of the UK shows, and there isn't really many shows like Thought Bubble. It's very much like, I don't know, it has a real car boot sale energy downstairs. It's really chaotic. So,
do you enjoy that though? Is there an element of that that's nice and good and different?
Yeah, so it's interesting, and there's something I'll explain to you just because we were talking about advertising before, and I'll give you like the way I consider these shows. Is it nice? It is. It is. It can be very, very tiring. And look, these shows are always tiring, but there's so many people. Yesterday was crazy, and that can really sap you. Like today, I am ready to stop now. I don't really feel like drawing today, but if somebody comes to the table, that's what I'm here for. But no, one of the main things is to just is to meet people. That's what this table thing is for. Like the amount of money that you can make and stuff doesn't really factor into it for me. Like this is much more interesting to, if somebody comes to the table, is to just have some kind of an interaction. Because to be honest, the reason why you do like work in comics is to tell these stories. But the stories are supposed to have an emotional impact on the readers. And I want to be able to talk to the people who read it. And quite often, a lot of the readers want to talk to you because you made something that was emotionally resonant to them.
Yeah, so and actually has been for me as well. I just now discovered that you're part of a comic book series that had an emotional impact on me and is very...
Oh, really?
And is actually quite relevant to my life.
Oh, I didn't... Oh, yes, sorry, you were saying... Yeah. So, yes, now that's making more sense. So that's why you were talking to Rory downstairs.
Yes, yeah.
Okay, yeah. So, yes, that was the son of Superman.
Yes, that's right, yeah. And this kind of... It's quite a controversial storyline that's been brought into Superman.
Yes.
But that image that you have, that I'm assuming that's your drawing, where you've got Superman embracing his son.
Yeah.
That's I find that really powerful and really relevant. And my son is 19. He's bisexual, and I embrace that side of him.
Yeah,
and I think that's really important as parents that we do that, and that we also have stories that can help us in that discovery of our journey of our children.
Yes, and I mean, so when we were talking about this downstairs, what I was saying was the way I always considered working on that book was like, you and I have Superman. We have our Superman, who was our parents' Superman.
Yes, yeah.
But he can't learn these lessons over and over and over again. Like there is a certain amount baked into Clark Kent and the Superman he is. But Superman was relevant to us when we were growing up. Like, he's supposed to be a morally upstanding, archetypal kind of character that, he's representative of the best of American values.
Mm-hmm.
But there are younger readers now, and you're not identifying with Superman as much. Like, he might feel a little bit kind of stiff because they don't have the emotional connection to that character that we would have from having grown up with him.
Yeah.
So when Tom was writing this book about Superman's son, what was interesting, particularly about the image that you're talking about of the two of them embracing in the sky, it was in this moment in the book where Superman, for whatever reason, for narrative reasons, had been off the planet Earth for, I don't know, about a year in publishing terms. There was a storyline, I don't remember who was doing it, of he was off-world, he was doing something. So John found himself, which is Superman's son, found himself in a position where he inherited the mantle of Superman. And we suddenly had like an 18 or 19-year-old bisexual Superman, which was interesting because he's also racked with feelings of inadequacy because he's a teenager. He's not just trying to live up to his own promise. He's not just trying to live up to his dad's expectations, but his dad is literally Superman. And like, I'm sure you remember just the pressure that we felt as fellas growing
as
up.
Normal teenagers.
It's just normal stuff. Yeah. So this character to me was so appealing working on this book because he was coming up against things that, like, Clark can't do that anymore. He can't be that to a new readership. But he can still be relevant in other ways. But the idea of having a young Superman that, and we were discussing this downstairs, the original Superman was an alien, right? That's an integral part of the American story, the idea of coming to America and being the best of what America can give. But Superman's son is from his marriage with Lois Lane. So we have, like, a son from a mixed race family, and he's the first generation coming to terms with his life in America, which is extremely relevant now. So those stories need to be told for modern readerships, and like that was the first one of these, and as you said, very controversial in America at the moment. That was it was an incredible book to work on because it's just you're talking to people who are going through something at the moment, and it's So
how does that actually affect the artwork that you produce? I can see it when I see that image. That gives me a feeling. I feel that image that you've drawn of the father and son hugging is an image that I need at home up on my wall because it's so powerful and it resonates with me.
Well, in the story, that's a moment where John has just had a battle with someone and he's in the aftermath of the battle, and again he's racked with indecision of, like, should I have done it this way, like, am I living up to the promise of what Superman means? And he hears something and he recognizes it immediately, and you realize that it's a heartbeat that he's heard, and he hasn't heard that heartbeat in a long time. And that's what he takes off straight into the sky. And the image that you're talking about is the first time he's been reunited with his father. And look, I'm a comic artist. I'm a storyteller. Like, that's what this job is. For me, the most important thing, I could take or leave the fighting side of stuff. Like, it's fun to draw. And what's funny about the run that I had on Son of Superman, I don't think he punches at anybody in any of it. Like, we've done a superhero.
But that's what I always loved about Superman compared to a lot of the other superhero comics. I loved all superhero comics, but particularly for Superman, for me, it wasn't about the battles. It was about the real world drama with an alien in it.
100%. You've taken the words right out of my mouth. The thing that was interesting about this was just, like, the acting is the most important thing for me. Like, you have to sell an emotional beat in a story, and that's the most important thing. And you've got to get the characters behaving right, looking right, the expressions on their faces. It's really, really important. Some artists are much more into, like, the dynamism and stuff like that.
And an element of that's needed, an element of that can be quite fun.
100%. Like, I mean, if you know how to get the acting and the emotion right on a character's face and in their movements, you can just as easily lean into the comedy of a moment as well. Like, I did a book then after that called Alan Scott, The Green Lantern. And there was the Spectre is in that. And he's quite comedic, even though he's quite dark. And so being empathetic to what the script is looking for is, like, that's my job, So finding the moments to make those key images that are resonant for people isn't that difficult, particularly if you're working with a really good writer. Like, Tom Taylor's amazing. So he wrote that whole heartbeat section and he handed the script to me. And for me, it was like, I know exactly what you're looking for. And that image has been enduring ever since. Like,
what does that look like as a comic book artist, that moment where the writer hands over the creative process to you? They've got this idea, this vision, and they've gone, there you go, make this visual now.
So that's the job. Like, so I've been exclusive with DC for maybe 3 going on 4 years. But I worked for Marvel and stuff before that as well. And my job is basically, when I sign on to a book, if somebody pitches me, because like, you don't have to say yes to a project. If the project doesn't feel right to you, don't do it. It's going to consume every hour of your day for months before it's finished. So, yeah. So once I've signed on to a book, I receive the script, and then I'm working on the layouts for the story to get to measure the beats of the narrative out, to get all of my acting and stuff, the choices of the framing of all the panels and stuff, to get that right. And then once that's approved by editorial, then I'm just into drawing. And that's just like headphones on and you're penciling and inking for the next 4 weeks. And that's how this happens every time. So I'm at the point now where I don't really think about it anymore once the script comes in. I just know that's a week of like some mental gymnastics, and then it's into the peaceful zen, like the flow state of just working.
So that mental gymnastics, then, what's going on? Are you pulling apart? Are you seeing how this kind of just plays out in your mind? Do you see the story as a comic book, or is there something else going on?
Yeah, so it's a fascinating question, because that's also something I would be interested to know how other artists do it. Because man, like, so you're doing so much of this on your own.
Yes,
and you take for granted as well that, and this is something I've spoken to friends and Rory about this as well. But like, whatever work process you settle on in the end could also just be dreadful. It's just you don't have it to any other process to compare it to. So I don't know what other ways other people work. So for me, it's the hardest part of the job. It's extremely tiring. You've got like 4 or 5 days where you have your script in front of you. And for me, the way I would do it, hopefully this is helpful to some listeners. I don't know if this is too in the weeds or not, but I'm trying to imagine so the way the script looks. You've seen a movie script, right? It looks like that.
Yeah.
So you have instead of just like the beats of a story or of a movie script, it's written in panels. So it will be like panel 1, Superman lands on the roof, and then the dialogue. Panel 2, Lois Lane steps out from the shadows. Panel 3, and so what you're doing is you're kind of organizing what do these panels need. So the first one would be an establishing shot. So I know that that's probably best used as like a letterbox, like a panoramic shot, so I can get a lot of the city in and stuff. So okay, once I've made that decision, then that has obviously an impact on the amount of real estate on the page that's left for the next 4 to 8 panels. I don't know, whatever the writer, how many beats they wanted on that page.
Yeah.
So lateral shots tend to, for the reader, last longer. Vertical shots tend to be much faster. So you can use that to great effect in fight scenes and things. Time and geography passes in the gutters, in the panels, the breaks between the panels. So in that white space, like, I can take you from the top of the Daily Planet to, I don't know, some far, like the bottom of the sea, the Mariana Trench, in one panel, and your brain has no trouble following that. So that time and space happens in the white space between the borders. So you can play with those things as well. But and also, as you probably noticed this, but if you don't have white space, if it's on a black page, or if you just layer your panels over each other, that reads so much faster. Like that white panel break actually slows things down. It's like a percussive kind of a thing.
Yes.
So, so basically what you're doing then is for me, organizing where the panels can go. There's only so many combinations and things unless you start to get into more creative, like jagged panels and things. Maybe there's a fight scene. Maybe you want some diagonal shots and things like that. You know, like the panels can just be different forms. So you can do all of those things. I don't tend to do that. It's not something that comes naturally to me. I like a much more rigid kind of a storytelling structure. Some people just go mad. They just do crazy stuff. I'm sure everybody has seen some examples of that. But what you're really trying to do is make sure, what is the key story beat on the page? What is the writer trying to convey, and how can I best do that? And I also have to make sure, like the invisible art of what we're doing is I need to make sure that your eye starts in the top left-hand corner and ends in the bottom right-hand corner as easily as possible. If I've made any decision where you go from panel 1 and as you're looking down, your eye is immediately drawn to panel 3 and I've lost you on panel 2, I have not done my job properly.
This is amazing, this consideration that goes into it isn't just a fact of drawing pictures, of how the audience is going to absorb that. And me as an audience member, someone that's loved and grown up with comics, I often questioned why comics were connecting with me and why comics worked. When I was a child, I didn't think I could read. I'm dyslexic, and that wasn't discovered till I was in my late teens. But I could always pick a comic book up and fully understand it and fully follow the narrative of it that I couldn't do with any other media. And this is all coming together for me and starting to make sense now.
It is fundamentally a unique platform for storytelling. Like, I really, really, really mean that. There are things that you can do in a comic you cannot do in a film, that you cannot do in a work of fiction, like a book. The fact that you can cover that much difference of time and space, the fact that you can go back and look at things can be more relevant. You can't keep rewinding a film the way you can just go back. Like there's so many things you can do, and obviously as a physical piece of media, I know there's a lot more digital comics and things now, but
it doesn't get anywhere near that actual having that comic book in your hand.
No, and there is a thing like some alchemical thing. I don't know what it is, but I submit my line art. It goes to a colorist. It then goes to a letterer. All of that process happens. They send me the printed edition about a week before it hits the shelves. And man, there's something happens that, like, I've worked on this thing. I know this inside out. I could tell you the dialogue. I've had to live and breathe this thing for weeks. But it's just a magic thing once it's in your hand and you see the speech bubbles on it, and it's just like something, I don't know what it is, but there is something intangible that does happen where it just turns from base metal into gold.
I guess for you, though, it's much different to the average reader, because at one point this was purely in your imagination and you've turned it into reality.
Yeah, I suppose it's there is definitely a you forget what you know kind of thing. Like, you work on this for so long that you take a lot of that stuff for granted. That, converting I used to find the layout stage really, really difficult. Like an absolute I'm finishing this issue and I know the script is going to come in. I'm going to have to do this again.
Did it feel like more like a task than?
100%. And it can be. It used to be far more taxing, but you'd be physically tired. Do you speak any other languages?
I don't. No,
right.
No,
so
partly because of my dyslexia.
That would have an impact.
Back, yeah.
So I speak Spanish too, because as I said, I live in Spain. But the only thing that I found comparable is spending a day trying to speak another language leaves you mentally exhausted. You could still be physically quite vibrant, but you are so tired, like stringing words together, making mistakes. You've used up a certain tank of energy that's up there. That's what it used to feel very much like that when I was doing the layouts, where it's just you're trying to do so many things. You're thinking of the camera angles. You're thinking of, like, for example, oh my God, I remember Tom had written a scene in, we were working on Injustice Year Zero, right? And there was a scene where the Justice Society had sat at this big banquet table. Batman was addressing them. And there was like 12 or 13 characters sitting around this, but they all spoke at different times. And man, I had to sit down and make a seating plan because I was like, I need to remember the order of who's talking to whom, because I can't just put Wonder Woman sitting beside Superman if they don't talk to each other. If I need to be able to navigate this room. Yes, so you're basically, you're plotting it out like the scene of a play. You've got like the theater, like the stage is there. Yeah. And I need to be able to have three people sitting in the background of this particular shot because one of them will have to talk to the person beside them later on, and man, like it's so tiring.
Yeah, and I guess you can't keep it all up here. So
no, you can't.
You need, like, I do a lot of the work within theatre, and
okay.
So within theatre, a long time ago, I was showing about the button method, where you have a piece of paper that's the same similar sort of layout to the stage, but you move your players around.
Okay, wow.
as buttons.
Yeah,
where do I want them to go? How do I want them to?
You're choreographing
the moves.
So that's, you're directing, right? And like I have to do that too in every single scene.
You have to direct. You have to direct.
You're the director. You are the director of photography because you're in charge of the lighting. Do you want this to be dramatically lit? Is this like the book I'm working on at the moment that's coming out next week? The question. they pitch that to me as like a detective noir kind of story. So I have to now light that in a very different way to how I was lighting stuff in Son of Superman, which was a metropolis-based story where sunshine is everywhere, like, everything's done out in the clear.
Yeah.
But now we're in this much darker space where, you've got this like tortured detective character who's like monologuing constantly, and so that needs to be much, much more starkly lit. We've got like that whole chiaroscuro.
I find it very interesting how you're referring to a lot of the stuff you do, almost like a filmmaker as well. Yeah, you mentioned even camera angles at one point there. So I didn't expect that as an artist, that you would be looking at it almost from the perspective of a film.
I get the script, and I have to turn the script into the thing that ultimately you're going to see. So one of the best ways I ever heard this described, I think Grant Morrison said, the writer tells the artist the story, and the artist tells the reader. That's the part of the process that I play. I'm going to turn the script into the thing ultimately that tells the story. So I need to be able to understand what the writer is asking me to do, what the emotion of the particular scene needs to be. And then after that, it's up to me to make sure that it's legible to you. You can follow it clearly, but does it happen, like I said, like, is this going to be in the shadows? Is this going to be out in the light? Am I responsible for setting the table for 12 superheroes so that we can adequately follow the flow of the conversation?
Yes.
You have to do all of that. You're in charge of everything. And the cool thing is, I'm not sure if you've ever heard this said before, but one of the things about comics is that there's no budget. So now your writer can absolutely hamstring you by saying like 10,000 horses come riding across the galaxy or whatever.
Yes.
You have to draw that. But you can draw anything
that your
anywhere,
imagination
and and so the thing is, you start with a white sheet of paper. You're responsible for giving things volume, giving things depth, giving things vitality, dynamism, all of that, while also trying to convey, like in that Superman thing, like emotion, like the sadness, the connections of people, the happiness, the anger, all of those things. You've got to get all of that in, and you've got to get that acting right. Otherwise, like you said, you could follow that story, right? You could pick up a comic, and even if you were struggling to read, you could still follow something. It's just as easy to lose people if you don't do it properly.
Yes,
because we know when it isn't right. Even if we can't articulate exactly what isn't working, something's dissonant, and that's as much of a subjective reaction to the thing in your hand.
Yes, because you're taking the story frame by frame.
Yeah.
You're picking out split-second moments, aren't you?
Yes.
There is no actual physical movement within the comic.
Everything comes from you. And like even down to, but specifically to that point, like if you're going to draw Superman punching somebody, do you want it to be when his hand is on the chin? Do you want it to be when his hand is way past the chin and the head has whipped around because of it? Like, where is the moment of impact? Well, where is the dynamism?
I've got my favourite comic book of all time, hugely impactful for me, was The Death of Superman.
Yes.
And I'm now thinking of Doomsday.
Yeah.
It was like the opening pages where he's punching the wall to break out.
Yep.
And you see, you knew that punch was happening at 1,000,000 miles per hour, but each frame was just that little bit further along.
Do you remember? Yeah. And so again, that is a choice to slow the moment down. They could just as easily have chosen to just do that in one punch and then move on. But you are.
I think it was over a number of pages.
And also I think, speaking of punches, is that not how they ended up killing Superman? Was one final punch?
One final punch. Yeah.
So they're even just in the language of punches.
Yeah.
There was
an open and close on that.
Yeah, on all of that, and they're all doing very different things narratively as well. So it's up to you to convey these things in interesting ways. So yeah.
So that was a comic book that influenced me. Where did this kind of all begin for you? When was that moment? Have you picked up a comic book and you was like, I want this to be my life?
I don't know, because I had kind of like tough stuff growing up as well. So there's a lot of stuff I don't really remember. So I always feel like I let people down sometimes when they ask these questions, because I can't really. There's a lot of kind of like gaps in the memory for some of that stuff. But like my father liked comics when he was younger. He definitely would have gotten me into that, but I was drawing everything for whatever reason, the same as you, would have just been drawn to these things to replicate them. Like I was copying all of my Spider-Man annuals of all of those things. I didn't read DC when I was growing up, so the irony of obviously just working for them now, and also the fun part of that being that I don't know any of these characters.
Well, that can be fun in the exploration.
100%. So I get Martin. I get a script that says John Kent arrives at the prison, and he's confronted by an enlarged letters like the Ultra Humanite, and I'm like, what the hell is that? Well, apparently, it's a huge monkey. But I like when you see these things, like I don't know who these characters are, and briefly you can still be struck by just the sheer like. The magnificence of just comics.
But I guess by that, you can bring something new to the table. And it sounds to me like you're the perfect person to write this new story of John Kent.
The interesting thing about it is, I would agree that if you have no prior preconceptions, say, of characters, you tend to be a little bit more kind of like fluid with
flexible
things. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. But that also sometimes doesn't help if you are confronted with a character that like you inherently don't understand what way do they carry themselves. Like, for example,
well, it could be dangerous for Superman because there's a huge fan base out there.
But again, you might not. It might not read properly if people have a sense of these characters, and particularly if they're fans. If somebody draws them behaving in the wrong way, like, I mean, think about it this way, in terms of body language, and I keep saying acting, but like. Wolverine has a different attitude than Spider-Man. If you see Wolverine contorting into the kind of shape Spider-Man is normally in, that is fundamentally wrong. I know that's a really kind of clear example.
Yeah.
But you have to understand, Batman broods, Nightwing doesn't. And if you have them in a panel together, or even like Commissioner Gordon is, they behave differently. You have to understand them. So the only time it's ever potentially problematic is sometimes if somebody drops a well-known character that I just don't know, there is always the risk that I might not convey them properly, and people may not like your take on a character, and it just comes down to the fact that I don't know anything about this character, and like I can't know them all.
No, of course.
But yeah, no, that's like that does happen. But I do think I also go into an awful lot of these things without any real kind of. These are not like it would be different if I was doing Marvel stuff, because I grew up with all of those. But like I'm not precious about these guys, and I want to do what the script feels like it's asking me to do, and I'd rather go with that than like some kind of slavish understanding of who these the quiddity of these characters.
I think that's great for you, that it sounds like you've got a lot of freedom and flexibility to bring, like I say, to bring something new to the table.
The editors have trusted me, and the nice thing is that the editors are the guys and the girls who are planning these books. And if you have a strong enough voice as an artist and you get the work done, then they're casting the books the same way you would cast any job. Cian can do this. And if Tom Taylor likes working with him, these guys together could definitely tell a story about somebody like John Kent with enough of the emotional pathos and stuff that the character deserves. That team now works on that book, and the book should be something that like they know who you are as an artist and they know what you can do. And so that's how you get those jobs. Because the nice thing about this job as well is these conversations come up all the time when you finally get to sit down with other artists and writers that you don't see for the rest of the year. So that's what we were saying, like why I would do a show like this. But we were just talking about, you know, if you meet an editor and the editor offers you a job or pitches you a job, you're not taking that job from some other artist. They've come to you because you have a singular voice. Like it's and the kind of art that you make, the kind of stories that you would write, like they don't just need writers to write comics. They need you to for your take on the character. So it's one of these. It's one of the few mediums that the sheer volume of content produced also means that, like, if you have a strong voice and you know how to tell your story,
there's room for everyone.
There's room for everybody. Everybody. You're not taking work from someone else. That work goes to you because you're the right person for it. And that happens on each project.
So where do you think you crossed over from being that person that copies and draws the things that you would find in the comic book then?
Oh, that's a great question.
You know, to being this person that now you've got your own voice. Because you needed that, didn't you? You needed to copy. You needed to replicate.
Oh, yeah, 100%.
You needed to replicate.
You stand on the shoulders of giants.
Yeah.
Like, 100%.
But then at some point you crossed over and now you're keen. And, how did that happen?
Do you know what? That is a great question because I have never considered that before in my life. I don't know. I think there are a couple of things I could say that might kind of answer around that, which is like, you get a lot of people who are concerned about style. Like, I don't know what my style is going to be. And one of the things, I've never been worried about that. I've never worried about that at all, because one of the things I was aware of early on was I'm a better artist now than I was a year ago. So I will be a better artist a year from now. So there's some of these things I don't have to worry about progression because it's linear and it curves, right? But when it comes to style and like what does my stuff look like compared to other people, if you end up doing this full time, and like I said to you before, like I was an art director for 11, 12 years. For the last 4 years of that, I was double jobbing. I was a senior art director for one of the biggest agencies in Dublin. And at the same time, I was doing 10-page stories for DC and Marvel. Like my evenings, my weekends, I was just like working all the time. Your style will happen whether you like it or not because you just have to produce the work. Once that deadline's coming, you got to get those pages done.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things that, like, look, you have to have so many fundamentals if you want to be a comic artist. Your anatomy, your perspectives, all that kind of stuff. None of us have learned any of that stuff. A lot of your bad habits will be compounded just by the sheer volume of stuff you have to produce. But you also get really, really good, really, really fast because you don't have a choice. Either you're going to be able to do it, or you'll be forged in that crucible. You know, not to sound too grand, but like you have no choice. So those are the kind of things that, like, I never concerned myself with those things because I knew that time was going to inevitably just sand the edges off everything anyway. But when do you transition from being just somebody who just finds joy in just copying everything? I don't know. I think probably don't we all at some point
in the doing. I think you kind of hinted on the you have this exponential words. I think that's what we're trying to do here. Words
exponential. Yeah, that curve.
Thank you for helping me out there.
No,
that curve where you're going along and you're doing the same thing a certain way for a long period of time. But then because you're repetition and you keep pushing forward, eventually there's going to be this quick uptick.
100%. Yeah, there will be a step. And also the thing as well is that the more repetitious an action is, the less of your attention you have to give it. So in the early days, and this is why people often say, you know, if you want to get into comics, you've got to make your own comics. One of the reasons why that's such a truism is because if you were handed a Superman page and you'd never worked on anything else, if you had to draw it and lay it out and draw it, you're so worried about every choice that, like, you can't work like that. You've got to have a certain level of fluency with the task at hand so that you're not agonizing over everything. Otherwise, like, you'd be frozen into an action, you know? So I think, there's a point where, like you said, if I'm getting really good at doing a certain thing, I may now feel like maybe I'll try something different with my panel layouts. Maybe I don't need to be quite so rigid. Maybe I'll overlap some things because I'm no longer worried about what I was doing. I'm confident enough in this thing, so I want to start testing the edges because I always feel a little bit like you should be at the point where, creatively speaking, you can almost feel like you're pushing your head against the ceiling of what you're capable of. And that's where you start going, I can't make my hands exactly produce exactly what I think it should be doing. But that's the edge that you should be pushing against because you're improving all the time. Like I said, a year ago, the work that I was doing is nothing like now. But other people won't see that, but I can see it.
Yeah, of course you can. No one sees the work that it's like that overnight success thing, isn't it? It's you know, for the world. Yeah. You when you enter the world stage, everyone sees you at that moment, and they think, oh, you've just appeared. You just did it today.
100%.
But there is a lot of work that went into the past for you. And so going into that a little bit, I wanted to touch on. You said about you being an art director. Yes. As well, and I wondered how that influences.
Massively.
What you're doing now.
Yeah, massively, because like advertising has changed an awful lot. Now it's mostly data driven, and it's marketing, and the creative stuff has started to filter out of it a lot, which is why it's not fun to watch the ads anymore, and it used to be. Yeah. But yeah, massively.
It's all on the metrics, isn't it?
It's
all on how many views and how and where are you looking on the page?
Yeah, as an art director, you used to be the person that they would come to ask for their expertise in, like, what would be a way to catch people's attention. Now they will say, we can't get people's attention here, here, and here, and the client will arrive basically armed with enough numbers that they feel on a level with the creatives, and so they are less inclined to trust you to just do something wild that you inherently feel will get traction.
But like you say, then the work that's produced is boring.
It's
dull
really
and
boring.
It's
It's boring because the clients have become the creatives because they can point at the metrics or they A/B test a line instead of just going in on something. So yeah,
It's interesting. I won't touch on what advert I've done, but I do a bit of acting as
Oh, cool.
well.
Yeah.
And that was interesting that I had the director there wanting me to do certain things, but standing behind.
oh yeah,
him,
we're behind them.
We're
Like,
behind him, like the client was saying, like, no, we need the bad shining here, and we need this moving there.
And even-
and he
even
was like,
between-
oh, but I could see him like so frustrated. The director.
And even between the client and the director, there should have been an art director and a copywriter. That would have been us.
The protecting.
Yeah, because the client doesn't know what the client wants.
No.
You know, like, I mean, because they are, again, do you know what? It's exactly the same principle we were just describing about they'll be fixated on certain things like brand cues and things like that that aren't relevant to the overall narrative of the ad that you're making, right?
Yes.
So the director is there to, like, the creatives would have chosen the director to work with. The director should be left to do what the director does. The same way that he'll ask you for your performance, but he's not coming over and moving your arms for you, right?
No.
So, but the clients tend to do that. So you need client service to kind of run, to shuttle between the creative team and the clients. And then you'd have us talking to the director while also being very careful to just let the director do his job, because otherwise why did you get a director? I'm
Yeah.
a big believer in, if you've hired somebody to do the job, get out of their way and just let them do it. Otherwise, do it yourself. But anyway,
Yeah.
that's a conversation for a different time. But,
And we slightly distracted and went on a side tangent from how that being an art director is influencing your art, right?
yeah. So the important thing was working in advertising was very much, it's become a buzzword now, but narrative was the whole point. Like, from the beginning of a campaign to the end, or even if it's a 30-second ad that you're making, you're telling a story. You've got to convey as much information as possible in a very short period of time. So you needed to be good at, like, understanding what is essential in a piece to get it across as quickly as possible. We did simple ads from, like, there was an ad for a food delivery company where the guy is clearly stressed in the kitchen. It's shot in the evening so people can see that it's obviously a dinner. He starts to, like, I don't know, the oven is about to explode or whatever, and then he starts to toss the salad bursts into flame. You've got like 20 seconds to tell all this story, so you've got to know that, like, he should have the sleeves of his shirt rolled up so that you can see he's stressed, but he's back from work. You've lit it so that it's the evening. You've got to tell all of that in the first couple of seconds. Being cognizant of the amount of visual storytelling that went into everything, and that's just like shooting for a TV ad. Like, I was doing press ads and things like where all of that would have to be built into it. Those things, like, absolutely essentially inform everything I do. When I receive a script for a comic page, and you're familiar, I would imagine, with the concept of Chekhov's gun. Like, if the gun is over the mantelpiece, it has to be used. Well, you often find, like, when people say, when you're doing an exam, like, read the whole thing and then go back. There are times when, with some writers, they will say on page 12 that the character is going to use something that I need to have established in a panel on page 1. Otherwise, it just comes out of nowhere. So, like, those are the kind of things that I have to be aware of. What's going in? What are the props of a scene and things like that? Having worked in advertising for so long and run, like, TV ads, photo shoots, all of those kind of things, every single bit of that is in everything I do. Like, there's I would not be the artist I am if I hadn't spent years working on, like, clarity and editing in scripts and things for other formats. So
that takes me on to, what advice would you give towards others that want to be a comic book artist? I'm kind of getting the impression from you that it's important to explore the wider world.
Oh, 100%.
To take in other things within life rather than just do the art.
Yeah, I mean, not to sound too, it's almost platitudinous at this point, but, like, the most interesting voices in any field are people who have, like, influences and interests far outside. If the only thing that you do is just read comics, you'll make good comics, but they will definitely just be they'll be derivative to some point. I mean, like, there are directors I love, there are artists, like painters, fine art painters, things like that. Like, the most interesting voices in comics are guys who are really pushing, like, they have an understanding of art history, they have an understanding of film. My interest, if I wasn't doing this, like, I love screenwriting and stuff like that, so that the ability to understand the story you're telling. You're not just drawing superheroes, as I'm sure this conversation has made abundantly clear. You're doing an awful lot of other stuff. So you've got to have interests from other things. Like, I don't know. I've said this to many people this weekend. The only comics I tend to read are the ones that I'm drawing because I have to read them first. But I don't read too many. I would love to read more. I don't have much time. But when I do sit down, I'm reading stuff about history, politics, things like that. I'm not reading comics. If I read a comic these days, it's because I'm about to start a new project and I look for the industry best examples of the genre or something similar to what I'm about to start on.
You're looking at it from more of a learning and exploration point of view,
it's all research.
rather
research
than entertainment and informing you in.
I'm not following what Captain America is doing at the moment. But I would like to know what the choices the artist was making or what the writer was doing with that character. Has something essentially changed? Do I need to know that the acting of the character has changed? Like, is there a legacy reason that the character's doing something else? Or like I said, I'm working on a noir series. What do noir comics look like? I don't know if I've ever read one of those. Who are the industry leaders in those? Like, is it Ed Brubaker and Sean Phillips? Do I need to be reading those books? What kind of choices are they making? The same way, if you were going to direct something, you'd go back to the Orson Welles movies. You'd go back to all of those. You want to see what those guys were doing, not necessarily to ape it, but there might be something that could inform some of the choices because you can't make decisions in a vacuum either. Like, you need to know what came before. Yeah. You cannot innovate and do all of the legwork that these guys spent decades doing before you. You are not that good. No. But you can build from what they've got and then potentially push it into a different space. So, yeah.
Is there anything that's informing you right now?
I don't know. To be honest, the things that are probably creatively fueling me at the moment is the amount of these different shows that I've done. More so than anything else within comics at the moment, it's bumping into the guys who are making these comics always seems to refresh you. Like, there are different voices, creatively speaking, that are like, man, the amount of talent downstairs is unreal. It's incredible. There's some of the best artists in the world are down there in a medium that still doesn't get nearly enough love, I don't think. But creatively speaking, being downstairs, being in a bar afterwards, sitting down and having a conversation about things come up, they bubble up, just in the nature of conversation. I mean, this is a perfect example of that. Like, you could go anywhere. You end up walking away with one or two insights that you wouldn't have had if you hadn't been speaking to them. I think that's probably the source of where most of these like flashes of like, oh, I've got to try this, or I must think of this, or somebody will recommend something. Because look, it's like a big brain share. If I'm downstairs and I say, oh, I'm working on The Question, and they say, oh, I loved this run that I never would have found. Nobody's telling me that. Somebody will know something downstairs that will fundamentally end up in there somewhere. Like, so it's the conversations at these shows are just invaluable.
And you're referencing the podcast here, where we're talking on the podcast, and these. For me, I learn something new from every single person I speak to. Every single person I come across sparks something, and I might not even realise it at the time.
No.
So sometimes it can be like they plant a little seed.
Yeah.
And I also find it interesting, like where the word podcasting comes from. It comes from spreading seeds.
Oh, right. Is it really?
Yeah, it's pod. As
in
pod
and
seed,
casting.
And casting them.
I did not know
we're
that.
essentially spreading ideas as seeds.
That's a super idea. I love that. Yeah, it's very cool.
It does. It's like you've planted something there for me today. It might not grow straight away, but then someone else might come along and water that idea. Yeah, and then I'll go, oh, that was that conversation.
Yeah, you'll have that breakthrough at some point.
And that moment.
And you'll be ready when that happens. It's because you were ready for something. I'm a firm believer in that. Yeah, big time.
Well, this has been a wonderful conversation.
Martin, it was a pleasure.
It's been lovely.
Yeah, it's been really, really great.
So thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you for asking.
As we wrap this up then, if anyone wants to find out a little bit more about you, discover your artwork, where do they find you?
So my name is Cian Tormey, Ciantormey. The nice thing about the name is that there aren't very many of us, so I got out in front of everyone and I have all of the handles on Twitter and Instagram. I am at Cian Tormey on everything. So if you want to see any of my work, if you want to send me a message or leave a comment or whatever, I'd be delighted to talk to anybody. And that's where I am.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Cian.
Thank you.
If anyone has been watching or listening, thank you for joining us for this conversation.
It's been a pleasure.
Thanks again. Bye-bye. Lovely.